Okay. Got it? Beauty. All right. Except that's way in the very back. We're probably not going to get to all of this. I'll do my best to speed through all of this and make sure we touch on the main points. Basically, building construction types, door types, window types. Something else. Okay. Okay. This is a real stunt, by the way. That's Buster Keaton. That was on a piano hinge system that weighed about 1,400 pounds. And he had to just stand in the spot and the whole thing came down. If it were off, he would have busted his back. This guy's a monster. Okay, so we're gonna go through different differentiate among the types of building construction. We'll go as we go forward here. Just some things to keep in mind as you go forward. These codes are all what we're looking at, fire codes or building codes. They're adopted by NFPA, but also the state. Then there's also local jurisdictions that can have a lot of these different codes. Obviously, if you've ever built in California, you know what a freaking nightmare this place is. It's a mess. Anyway, if you've ever tried to put something in, don't. So, so basically we break these down according to what's the building for? What's the purpose of the building? How big is it? And then what kind of fire suppression building has gone into it or equipment that's gone into it. It's kind of how we break them down. So when you're doing any of your quizzes, they're going to talk about types 1 through 5, really, the big types of building construction. And it goes from type 1, which is pretty much fireproof, except not fireproof because it's, though not made of combustible materials, when superheated, they can crumble and lose integrity. So you're looking here at a building that's got masonry and different types of, this is actually, I think, these are just temporary pieces of wood or something in there. When I was in Thailand, they would put bamboo all through there just to hold it in place. Pretty interesting to see. So fire resistive is what you call type 1 construction. It's the highest level of protection from the fire spread and the collapse. They're non-combustible structural members, mostly concrete. And they don't add to the fuel load. However, sometimes what is inside has the ability to ignite and cause big fire. And so they're going to they stay up and not collapse for a longer period of time, which means when we're fighting fire, we can be in there for an extended period of time, provided we're looking for the loss of integrity from the crumbling or the superheated air in the environment due to whatever is inside those non-flammable or fire-resistant structures. So just because it's built of it doesn't mean that there's not stuff inside that can burn. Usually reinforced concrete, precast concrete blocks or cinders, or created on the ground and tilted up into place, and protected steel frames inside. So they won't burn, but they can degrade. Okay. So, as I mentioned, inside there, it's essentially a concrete oven. And whatever's inside there is going to hold that heat. There's no dissipation between the concrete. So, it might be very, very difficult to remain in that structure and fight the fire. One of the major ways that we can get into a superheated area is, of course, by opening up windows or opening up ceilings and ventilating, thereby essentially creating a chimney to allow the superheated air to get out and some of the smoke. So now you can see the fire, you can cool down the room so you can fight and extinguish the fire. And so in a case where you have concrete everywhere, well, it's going to be very difficult if there are any windows at all. And a lot of times those roofs are big industrial roofs that are going to take forever to cut through. And so we're not going to be able to do that as easily with the truck company that we would a concrete or a shingled house, a comp shingled house or something. We carry, as truck companies, typically you have a chainsaw that cuts through. It's got a blade that can cut through wood, but also the shingles and stuff. I mean, it's just a durable blade that cuts through a couple of things. And then if there's anything more than that, tiled roofs or concrete roofs, we have rescue saws, which are basically just giant skill saws. What's that? Like it's got like the sacrificial blade on it. Yeah, big blade saws that will either cut through steel or concrete. You can throw water down to kind of cut through. Yeah, we call them rescue saws. And so they'll cut through. Basically, it's the same stuff that you're used to using, I'm sure. It's for cutting concrete or saltile tile or tile roofs or S tiles or whatever. And then of course the windows don't operate. Now here's type 2. So in this case, you may have bare metal exposed. And of course, you know that when metal gets superheated, it can catastrophically fail or in itself melt. So again, not great for prolonged periods of time. When it's hot, eventually these things can collapse on us. But the material itself typically doesn't contribute to the development of the fire or the spread. Sometimes these structures will have like large steel and they'll kind of cover them with like gypsum, like a spray composite. Look around. Where do you see something like this? Or something like this? Your big clues, these are like your parking lots, which obviously structures that you burn, the fire will burn in the cars and everything, but you're able to, if that's going to be what it finally looks like, you're not going to contain a lot of heat in there. You'll be able to fight fires in there. A little bit different if this is like a sub-level car garage. Now you're dealing with ventilation as a concern. Here's your typical type 2. Kind of, there's a lot of these around Novato. They're just kind of your basic office buildings. All down Novato Boulevard, there are places near the library that look like this. And again, what do you know about the materials that are used inside those kinds of buildings? They're a lot like one of those buildings. I do see concrete tilt up. But a lot of these buildings have lightweight, new polymer, easy, durable stuff in it. Here's laminate wood. There's fire resistant carpeting. There are all of these little fiberglass or polyester or styrofoam drop ceilings in them. And all of this stuff, when it burns, it goes very, very fast, very hot, and very caustic. So when you're in those fires, they can spread very rapidly, especially when we get into like mobile homes and things. They just go up like a torch. And if you're not there quick and you're not aggressive, you've lost everything inside that building. This thing will go a little bit longer without having to collapse. But when you're in there, again, you kind of have that oven effect where all of this stuff is burning and it's just contained in here. And a lot of times these windows are unopening, or if they are, there's going to be like one that's tempered glass. All the rest of them don't work. They're laminate like a windshield. And so if that's the case, you got to know where to break it if you can at all. I mean, there's a lot of different things we'd have to concern ourselves with here. Probably to ventilate this place, unless we had to use like a sawzall to cut through the windows, would probably take way too long. We would probably open up these doors and try to do something called hydraulic ventilation, where you run a hose line through, you spray around the corners of that wall or that door, and you create a Venturi effect and kind of suck out the smoke and the heat. And then you can visualize what's going on in here. But there's really no vertical ventilation we can deal with. What's above us? Another whole office building, all laid out, and that's not going to help us here. So the construction materials, they don't burn again, but they don't meet the same standards. They can melt. Steel composites need to be protected for the same time, or have some fire resistant rating as type 1s do. And so you'll see on a building parking structure, you'll see that it's kind of like a fuzzy particulate that they spray the I-beams or the steel beams with, the girders with. A little bit smaller, lightweight, and lower fire resistant ratings. Here's kind of the inside where a lot of this would be used as metal framing instead of wood and instead of concrete. So they can run it kind of the same way that you would your studs in a house. They could be metal, and in fact, they could be exposed metal. That's concrete tilt up there. And then here you can see concrete wall, concrete tilt up building here. And then they would build inside there with different larger rooms where they're breaking them down into different offices. Would probably be exposed metal with either some kind of sheetrock or gypsum or particle board or something. Not particle board. Yeah, particle board, right? All over the sides of it. Here's a couple more type 2s. So where would you see? And it doesn't have to be an enclosed structure too. This looks a lot like the solar arrays that we have in the parking lots or industrial style barns now and large farms. Kind of have that same look to them. Type 3 is ordinary construction. That means ordinary building materials. So woods, metal frames, drywall, regular nails or screws. And in situations where you're fighting with type 3 construction, it typically, the difference here is that it's for public usage. This is going to be a building that we have major traffic involved in this place. This is what we call a strip mall. And in a strip mall, there's a couple of hard things to manage. Where are the walls between these different buildings? Do we have any space between building to building? They're all on what's called common walls. You'll see a lot more of those in San Francisco. But there's a wall that separates, it's a partition, essentially, that separates the liquor store from the nail salon. But just above that drop ceiling, it is one single roof all the way across. And unless they put in some kind of fire blocking, once it gets into the roof, it will roll through that strip mall and wipe out everything from the top down. So strip malls are very, very tricky situations to manage. And what we try and do is, if we have a fire here, we kind of write off the side, the two from the immediate right and left of it, and then start fighting fire here, breaking through the ceiling, seeing if we have fire growth above us, and you just follow it back to a spot where you have a safe enough distance to do some work. And then you trench cut big trenches on the roofs. So while the fire comes over, it leaves like a fire, like building fire, a fire block on a wildland fire, except you just make a big gap in the roof, and then you can spray into that spot or kind of let it vent that way, but it doesn't move on to the rest. Strip malls are really hard fires to deal with, because if you don't thoroughly manage that immediately, if you're not aggressive in fighting it out and then doing a really good salvage and overhaul, a lot of times a whole strip mall will burn down in about an hour. Or you miss a spot and it kind of sneaks through into the other back wall or through the roof to another building or to another store, and then we'll light that one on, and that whole place keeps going. Commonly found in, as I said, strip malls, residential structures, mercantile structures, older schools, Okay, so exterior walls constructed of non-combustible or limited combustible materials, usually. What do you have on the fronts of most strip malls? Glass. Yeah, glass and steel. Sometimes roll up doors, depending if we're in the front or the back, sometimes concrete, but usually it's like a steel between some steel um, um, stud or some kind of structural member between the glass and between the glasses or concrete. And then everything inside again is just whatever they're using to build. You can imagine nail salon fire, not the best thing to be breathing when you're inside there. They already knock people out just by walking into some of them. I've been on plenty of people getting their nails done and they pass out from the noxious fumes inside there. And then usually built of some kind of wood construction inside there. Very often the walls that are separating them aren't what's holding the building up. They're partitions, but they're not load bearing walls. They're not walls that are holding the roof and the structure in place. They're just separating out room for business to business. So what do we have to worry about with type 3? Well, we have void spaces. That's the spaces in between those stud bays or the thickness of these pieces of wood. It's usually either 2x4 or 2x6. Some places are 2x8. But the fire can grow and leak into that wall and then climb the length of that stud bay. This was a big, big issue back when we built in California, say, with old growth wood. We would get these huge, long, 3-story pieces of wood or trees that we'd mill down into timber. And then we'd lay up the walls and it would be 3 stories high. So you just put these up and then put two different levels of flooring in there. Well, what happened would be there'd be a fire somewhere in the first floor or down in the subfloor, and it would walk through that entire 3-story stud bay and get up into the roof, even sometimes missing the second and third floor and go right up into the roof. And then you'd be fighting a fire and it looked like you had it out and the roof would be going. So that was called balloon frame construction. That's balloon framing construction. And to manage that, we do what's called fire blocking through here. And that's in it's, you can imagine on the other side of that OSB, you'd have another piece of wood. And so if anything got into that area, leaked into it, it would stop at the 2x4 cross member, cross like that. Is that how you do yours? Do you stagger them like that?
The engineer calls for in the plans, but either staggered.
I just go straight across. Yeah, I thought that was. This is much easier. Yeah, I never was able to. Didn't know you could do that. Yeah.
What did you call it?
Fire blocking, fire blocking. And then there's an issue with the actual ceiling itself. What the roof is made out of are these, rather than just running like traditional beams and rafters off and having individual supported pieces of wood on a load-bearing wall. To make the long stretches, they'll do truss construction. We'll get back to this later, but essentially by using the dynamics of triangles and building with some tension, depending on what the type of truss is, it can span long distances by its own structural member. It's kind of like a keystone is that stone that sits between an arch. Similarly, a truss system supports itself by one means or another. But once one part of that truss fails, the entirety of the truss's integrity fails and that building can come down and collapse on you. This is one of those up here. You can see they have kind of the triangle, right triangles through there. And so once it gets into the ceiling, you don't have a lot of time. That was type 3. Type 4, heavy timber. You see this in, where do you see these? Nice big timber. Okay. Lodges, yeah, lodges, cabins. Where else? Rich people's houses. Yeah, yeah, Tiburon's laden with these. Um, churches, yeah, old traditional churches, built in America, not the cathedrals, but the churches themselves. And again, because they have these big, large dimensional timber, they take a while to get burning. Imagine them as just large, thick logs that take some time to burn, but they will burn. Additionally, these go up usually 2 or 3 stories high. You've mentioned, the big lodges or the cabins. And so if it does get to the ceiling and that ceiling starts to fall, it's got some speed as it's coming down. It's got velocity, and you have large timbers coming down and slamming down. My father said he had one in a church and it was completely blacked out from the fire. And there was just giant pieces of timber falling and like smashing through the pews. And you're like, should we just keep going? Okay. It's a little bit, you're like, hey man, I'm in your house. Will you take care of me, please? Anyway. Okay, so constructed of solid, or it could be laminated wood. There's really no concealed spaces. The whole point of it is to have exposed beams to appreciate the beauty of it. And the exterior walls are constructed of non-combustible materials oftentimes. So again, it will burn. Those large pieces, you have some time in there as long as the interior materials aren't fast burning. You have some time to work inside there. What about cathedrals like Notre Dame? I got a cool story about that. Um, Notre Dame Cathedral in France that just lit on fire, the one up about 4 years ago. That's concrete, right? That would be your type 1 building material, except everything inside there, all of the wood and the paintings and the furniture and the tapestries, and that all eventually, it's crazy how that thing burnt up like that. There was a piece of religious artifact that was there. I feel like it's a crown of thorns or something, they thought. And the fire department went in and risked their lives to get that out of the tabernacle. Not like modern day Knights of Malta. They went in like, well, at least get that out. That's a good story. And I'll be like, yeah, I kept that thing alive for another couple thousand years. All right. Here's your type 5, your typical residential structures that we are going to be, bless you, managing around here in the residences. And so, yes, there are some concrete or there's going to be stucco or something on the outside, but the actual building components are wood largely. And then on the outside, they'll have stucco or brick or some kind of stone, but they're covering the wood themselves. Of course, this is necessary. If you go up a couple of stories, you're going to need fire blocking through here. We'll break this down in a minute and kind of look through what we're dealing with here. If it were to burn like this, you're basically burning a Lincoln log system that you've built that just is perfectly spaced to go up in fires. And oftentimes you go on calls where, let's say, a plumber was sweating pipes together and somehow a piece of it, the slags hit the sill plates, or it got on some of this wood, and that just burns like an ember. And if you're not careful, maybe it's the end of the day, they leave, no one notices. Now that fire starts to build, the ember becomes a flame. And then once it starts to torch off, it really has nothing stopping it. It'll burn through there very quickly. So this is typically 2x6s or 2x4s. And this is going to have all of the stuff that we would have in our houses. So a lot of the stuff we buy now, any IKEA or any kind of Target material, is basically chips of other pieces of wood that are glued together. And that glue works very, very easily. Got a bunch of chemicals in it. So when you burn a house these days, it starts a lot faster, burns a lot hotter, and does a lot more to your lungs if you were to breathe it than anything in the old days. The old days, wood, plaster, you know, that fire would take some time to grow inside a room or a house. And so firefighters, the old school method of doing a fighting a fire would be you get to the door, you check it for heat, you open it up a door. Doors are very crucial in this job, by the way. Keep them closed. And when you open them, be ready to close them or open them and get out of that doorway. That's a bottleneck that a lot of people die dealing with. You look inside, you see where the fire is. If it's building in there and you can't really see, you look down low. This is before they even had that CBAs. And then what you would do is get low and you'd crawl to different locations in the room with the hose. As the fire's banking down, it kind of creates a thermal barrier where you can just see down below, like the last foot and a half through the floor of the house. And you'll see like a hot seat of the fire. So everyone gets inside. And then as everyone's in position, they would open a door or they would potentially, these are very tricky procedures, but break a window and let that fire and the heat get out. There's something in San Francisco, you'll see they're no longer allowed, but they're called transoms. If you've ever seen like the office buildings, you'd have like the door and then a big window above the door on the inside. You'd be in the place and you'll see like this big window like above. You ever seen those transoms? Yeah. They're in the old style houses. You open that transom up and everything goes right out there. Now you have to have a crew waiting outside because that can light the hallway on fire. Once that opens up, the fire smoke level rises up and you can see where you're going and you can put that fire out. And firefighters would take 2 or 3 minutes inside that fire to get there. Nowadays, with hot, fast burning, whatever, not wood material, I'll show you a video. It goes rapid. And I mean, within a few minutes. So probably by the time we get there, if it's a decent fire, it'll be what's called fully involved. It'll be the whole room's going. Fire, flames, everything has flashed over. Everything is on fire now. It's no longer building. It's at its full level. And we're essentially saying that room is done. We're going to just count that off, protect the other rooms, and then we'll put this thing out first. So that's our recio, is to get around all the other rooms, salvage them, put tarps up, make sure they don't get burned and make sure they don't get damaged from water, and then fight that fire inside. That's provided there's no rescue. Now, again, with rescue, if that room is fully involved, the chances of someone being alive are basically none. So we have to get there, pull out people while it's in its growth stage, its incipient stage. And then once that's out, then we can put the fire out. All right. So that's burning hard. This up here is what? It's unburned fuel. And so that looks like it's just what's called flashed over, where the smoke itself that is potential fuel has caught light. It's gotten hot enough to even ignite the smoke leaving the building. And whoom, that whole thing goes. That's what it sounds like. And it goes, and you don't want to hear that sound. You're in big trouble. Okay, a lot of times here's what we're dealing with for like prefab roofs on a type 5. This is if the roof is not going to be put in the traditional way, which is you go up, you lay a beam across the top, and then you put rafters along those beams. And then you put blocking in for the the sheet plywood to go across or whatever you're going to put across. And you lay that all in place. And then you put some kind of plastic weatherproofing on it. And then you put composite shingles, or you're going to put on, if you're going to put on tile, sometimes you have to put little side strips, furring pieces that you put tile onto. But those roofs are pretty stable in terms of fires. They are all rafters, pretty much hold that spot in place. If one fails, the other two around there can kind of hold that building's roof in place. But you might see sag. So one of the big things we have to worry about getting on a roof, do we feel sag in the roof itself? And so you go through with a big pike pole, smashing into the ground that you're about to walk on. And if it bounces like crumbles, don't step on it. If you get a good bounce, good solid feel, you keep going through. And the person behind you's got the chainsaw. You get to the spot you want to go to. That person gets out of the way, the chainsaw goes in and cuts out maybe one full bay, maybe cuts the rafter between the other two rafters. Roll the roof up and you let the smoke and heat out. You may have to punch down through the ceiling of the inside. And then all of it comes out, and then those people inside can fight the fire. So the people doing that on the roof are the truck company. People inside with the hose fighting the fire, waiting for you to break that chimney open. They are the engine company. They're the ones with the water. Again, with these roof trusses, these prefab trusses or the wooden I-beams, these again, look at this. Can you see the composite in there? And so that's just glued together, but it holds in place with the I-beams upper and lower pieces of 2x4. It doesn't take a lot to pop through those. Those are actually, a lot of them have little holes in there that you can run. What runs through all of these bays? Most of the time, plumbing, electrical, maybe gas down below. Yeah, that's good. But plumbing, electrical, vents, like septic vents and things, which count for plumbing, but so be aware that that stuff's running through there, and you got to find a good spot to get through. Kind of look around at what your room looks like and figure out where is going to be a nice clear space for you to slip through if need be. These trusses, once they start to fall, everything falls. They're made out of industrial glues and adhesives. A lot of these things are essentially like little Presto logs. The glue just makes the whole thing. Be aware of that. So when we're there, we want to find out, have we gotten a good look at this building? What type of building is it? And by that, do we know how much time we have left to go fight this fire? So we're sizing up the situation. You go in, what falls into a size up? Well, let's see. When you show up on a call, what are you looking for on that house? Now you know you're looking at what type of structure it is. When you're looking at that structure, is it a type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Is it a residential or a commercial? Could there be a chance of people inside? Do we have all parties accounted for outside? And now you start looking at what's the size of this building, how big, and where's the fire in location to this building's layout? What's the smoke look like? Is it wispy white or gray smoke? Is it big, black, billowing, charged smoke coming out? Do you have just huge flames? Do you see it climbing through the ceiling? Is it just in, say, a kitchen, which is a very common call? Kitchen fires start up all the time. Call them kitchen fires or room and contents fires. And based on that, it's going to dictate what we decide to do on that call, what our fireground actions will be. We obviously want to get quick water on the call. We want somebody inside putting water on the fire as soon as possible. And if need be, we want to punch a hole in the roof or open a window to let out the heat and the smoke to minimize the chance of that flashing over and to assist in the people with the hose line to put that fire out sooner than later. And of course, if you're not able to get there in time or this thing's burning hot and fast, the duration of the fire is going to massively dictate your actions on the fire. So once you have a fully, say a residential, chances are that's going to just be what we call surround. Nobody's inside, just fully involved, ripping through a house. We don't need to go inside. I mean, there's whole rooms that are open. Don't bother trying to put out a fire that's fully burning inside the house. If it's in its growth or incipient stage, and you feel like you can get in there and make an aggressive attack on it before it flashes over, do that. That's what a good aggressive crew with an intelligent captain can do. They make that decision and they work fast enough to set up their water and get in a good spot and make a tactical entry in a spot that's going to stop the fire that's gonna be a crew that can get more done and manage a call without loss of life and loss of property, which is our big goal. What's this building? I think I already said it. Type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many think type 1? How many think type 2? How many think 3? 4? You're too tired, raise your hand. Probably this is a type 2. This looks like a concrete tilt up, you think? Or poured in place. And inside you have, how there's gonna be, the roofing is gonna be some kind of truss system. Up through here, you have a ceiling that goes beyond this spot. This is just a drop. And up there, what do we have in terms of like a roof on this building? Well, let's get to that later. So around here, these are what we do in fire planning. We're going to go to the schools, try and figure out where our water would be for this place. Where's our water here for this building? Sprinkler system, good. And if you wanted to get your own hydrant and manage the fire beyond what the sprinklers would do, where's our hydrant? Anybody know? Bless you. Right over there by the parking lot, they kind of make the decision based on that. But the fire company that's over at Jack in the Box will have as their responsibility of the fire planning for this location, because this is a very big, highly trafficked area of hazard or interest. So this is one of their big spots. Then you have all the apartment or the condos over there. And what you want to find out for the condos, same kind of thing. What's the actual material that's built? And a lot of new homes will have a traditional look, but they'll be built out of some kind of lightweight construction instead. And so a good thing to plan is where are your hydrants in those locations? What are the layouts of each one of those condos? There's usually only about 3, maybe 4 layouts that all of the condos follow. In other words, you show up and it's the family room, kitchen, stairs up to the bedrooms, and then like a back patio. And that structure is found like 16 different places throughout the whole complex. Know what that looks like from the outside so that when you go into a fire and everything is blacked out, you can't see, you know what the building layout is. And so if I know there might be people trapped at 4 a.m., I'm not going to spend my time down in the kitchen in the family room. I'm going to go up the stairs to the bedrooms and find the bedrooms back there. So that's an important type of thing to do, is to look at your buildings in your specific area, know the hazards, what type of construction it is, and then have them plan on how you would actually fight that. We'll get more into that when we're talking about firefighting or the fire ground tactics. Okay. And then you have things like manufactured prefab homes, mobile homes, although the new ones that are coming out are astounding. If you've watched like This Old House lately, they have huge factories that build prefabbed houses with walls already plumbed and piped, and they just stick them together and attach a couple of things, and it looks like it's a fully, ground up building. Very cool. The issue is, again, it's built largely of prefabricated stuff. Oftentimes, it's not the full dimension, not even full dimension. It's not even 2x4. It's like, even smaller than that. Very, very thin walls. If you've ever walked in a mobile home, it's like boom, boom. You can just feel how unthick it is. Yeah.
Have you ever seen tiny homes?
Oh, good point. No, I've never fought a tiny home. Now, the other thing is we have these little like cabins for homeless people that are all going up everywhere. In San Jose, they built like 4 of the little like complexes, and it's essentially like a wooden or a composite trailer or a shed that you can get from Costco. And they just put them up everywhere. Those things, if they go. They're like a 1 or 2 bedroom kind of thing, or 1 or 2 room kind of thing, right? Typically, the tiny homes are like a kitchen with a bedroom and like a bed that folds down. It's all very multi-purpose. Probably same building materials. It's gonna be, if you need to transport it, it needs to be light. And so it's gonna be built with the lightest stuff possible. The issue is, those things, they're definitely death traps unless you get people out of those things. So a mobile home park, there's a lot of issues with them. They burn quick. The people inside are usually older and they're in ill health oftentimes. So the rescue factor is giant. Aside from that, mobile home parks don't usually have the full size fire hydrants. They have these things called pony hydrants. There's little like 2.5 inch or 3 inch little hydrants that come up with one outlet. So the water's restricted as you get there. And they're close enough together that the radiant heat can light one on fire, and the simple radiation, not even embers, but the heat from one could start the second one next to it on fire. And these go very, very quickly. Rapid fires are mobile home fires, strip mall fires, and then big fires in like San Francisco with common walls or apartment complexes. You see them go full out dealing with those things. Very, very aggressive firefighting because, again, they go rapidly and there's often a high chance that there's somebody inside. So rescue is a big, important thing. Most mobile homes completely fabricated before they even get placed. They often have wheels, or once they are wheeled to a location, the wheels are kind of taken off, or they lower down a foundation and the wheels are left there. Yeah. Oh. Oh, okay. Hi. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Okay. Sometimes they're not required to conform to the local building codes. They have their own that have to fall into how they use it. Might even be according to Department of Transportation. It might be something like where it's a weird jurisdiction. And they have to conform to like housing and urban developments because the use for these are usually low income. So if that's the case, HUD is what oversees it. And if it's on the freeway, DOT has to oversee it. The homes constructed before 76 have less fire resistance than current construction. Remember, in the 70s, fire prevention really girded all of the restrictions on building with bad technique and encouraged or even required a whole bunch of other safeguards that went into building houses, particularly building industrial complexes, sprinklers, standpipe systems established, fire rated doors. All of these things have to be put into place. Okay, so they burn rapidly and they burn down quickly. So because remember, here's a good one. It looks like, I believe it is from a mobile home, but it's also built by, it's just somebody's, yeah. So that's fake brick. You don't even know. Walker. He looks right at it the minute. No, doesn't even see it. Okay. Might be a few Manhattans on it at this point. About 30 seconds maybe right now, huh? Let me have this. You can't. Yeah. So it's now climbing up against that ceiling, that composite type of polyester ceiling, styrofoam. Oh. It's still I think it looked like they cut, it might have, or it might have been the smoke whooshed around the camera now, it's obscuring. The fire looks at roughly the same location. It's falling, it's gonna catch that big thick carpet burns like you wouldn't believe. The fabric on the couch is burned. Here it comes. Now it's rolling across the ceiling. Mhm. It's just, again, as I said, that is, it looked like a little like a scent candle or something, Yankee candles, that stuff like sits out in the houses, these people sometimes aren't the cleanest. So they burn a candle in there to kind of make the room smell better, and it can be bad. Here's a house with fire sprinkler versus no sprinkler. And this is what we're looking for when we come in there. I see low smoke here, but you'll see this start to walk across the ceiling. They're called fire angels. They're kind of there as an omen for you to know, do not enter this room without caution. They kind of roll across the ceiling. That's just before it flashes, you get that. It's lighting the smoke as it rolls across. 7 minutes. No, that's burning. There you go. And don't underestimate the damage, bless you, that water does to property as well. Bless you. So lightweight materials really make a big issue here. And the modern construction has just sped up the need for rapid firefighting and the need for protective equipment, especially SCBAs. Whereas in those old structures, you could kind of, not healthily, but at least you're breathing wood and plaster when you're in the fire and breathing low. Most of those guys ended up getting some kind of cancer anyway. Nowadays, there's no way you can go into an IDLH, an immediate danger of life and health environment like that building on fire and not be taking in massive doses of caustic material. It can close down your larynx. It can cause laryngeal spasm. It can cause you to suffocate. The chemicals themselves, like hydrogen sulfide, will burn inside your body. It will actually eat through the alveoli of your lungs. It's bad news. Is that what happened to you? No. We have a survivor, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And it just knocks you. Yeah, it's bad news. So by all means, that's why it's so important we can get SCBAs on in 1 minute, because it's just something we have to do to then get into that fire. Otherwise, it's going to go up very, very quickly. And then there are other things to worry about when those fires, the floors often give out and you can get trapped. Sometimes the flooring between the mobile homes, remember there's wheels underneath it and there's cinder blocks. You can get stuck in the floor of the fire and you're locked in because your SCBA stuck in the hole and you're stuck and you're trying to put it out and the fire's rolling over you, but you're locked waist up in the fire itself. You have to really watch out, not just like the roof, but checking and sounding as you go. But you can use your foot and go through or take your axe and sound the floor. Hit it, bang it, listen, feel it. Very important. Okay, that's a mobile home fire that just, good luck. So what I'm talking about is there's the floor and you can fall right through the floor and be caught from the waist up in that fire. It rips through here. Fire is here. It's moving this direction. Look how much has already started to heat up and how much the fire is spread through there already. This is bad smoke, by the way. Can you all see? That's bad smoke. Billowing, dark, gray, black, or in some cases, yellowish. Almost a brown, like you can literally see the atomized wood in it. That's just waiting to whoomp, to flash. So let's look at some of the ceilings and floors. Here's your basic rollout here. Here's your concrete slab. You'd have like sill plates along here that will run, and then you're going to attach the studs to this. So there's a floor of concrete, there's wood laid down and kind of secured to the concrete itself, usually within all thread or some kind of tie. And then you build from the bottom up. You build bottom floor, studs. Between the different rooms, you're going to either have wood that runs across, or you can have, in this case, they're showing floor trusses that run across there. Depending on what size you're spanning and what building type this is and who's going to be inside there, it's going to have different specifications on what to use there. But our big concerns are, what are the things separating floor to floor? And if need be, how are we going to get out of these walls? Then you get up to the ceiling here and you have the actual ceiling itself. You have usually a big long beam that runs across the top, and then there are rafters that run down and down and down. What are we looking at here? This looks to be what's called like a prefabbed truss. And rather than put these pieces in hand by hand and nail the rafters onto the beam and then attach them down at the sides and then put in little Simpson ties along the whole way, they sell prefabricated truss systems that are, we'll see in a minute, that again, our big concern is once one starts to fail, they all start failing catastrophically. There's not much holding them in place. Keep in mind in between here, there's all of this other stuff floating around. Wiring, recessed lighting, audio speakers, insulation. What does that mean for us? What's that? Itchy. Yeah, man. This stuff is rough. When you're pulling out of the insulation and it's getting in your collar. But if you're in a fire and you need to get out, you got to find a location that's clear enough for you to get through. So how are we breaking through these walls? Am I getting through this? You want to be able to clear out both sides and figure out, if I'm here, do I see any wiring from there to there? Okay, that's probably clear. Do I have any kind of air ducts above or below? And so every firefighter, when we go into a fire, you want to have some kind of breaching tool, usually an axe or a Halligan or pike pole or something that you could use in case you needed to evacuate rapidly. You go through walls, you go through windows. In some cases, in order to help us out, we have these placarding systems put in. So for instance, the type 2 fire resistant material, it lets you know what the material is as we're going into fight, so that we kind of have all in our game plan how to manage it. Okay, what could we have for floors? We could have poured concrete. We could have cellular concrete over metal decking. We could have wood or finished wood or tile or carpet over some kind of plywood. And then in the ceilings, we could have gypsum, tin tiles. You see those a lot in like Irish pubs. It's essentially this idea, except it's made out of tin. They're not structural. What does that mean for us? If we went into a building and we have a drop, this is called a drop ceiling. It's not the actual roof. It's a ceiling that comes down and there's a void space between the roof and what we're seeing. So for us, if you're fighting a fire and you need to ventilate from the roof down, it's not enough that you cut a hole in the roof. You now need a long pole to reach from the roof down through and poke a hole into the actual room itself. So we'd need, this is not one of those roofs. This is not a roof that you could do this with. If there was a pitch on this, you'd be up there cutting a hole, lifting the hole, the siding up, and then poking through to open up this space in here. And it might be a styrofoam material. It might be the tin tiles. It might be lath and plaster, in which case, good luck. A lot of times plywood is pretty easy to use, actually. Plywood, if you hit it with the right ceiling hook, it'll fall in sections. Lath and plaster, remember those little strips of furring little strips of wood, and then they just plaster over that. You're gonna be gassed trying to break through little spots. You can pop a hole, pop another hole, pop another hole. It's ruthless work. It's very hard to do. Very hard to do.
Is it hypothetical that you're having to break through like the drop ceiling? How do you stay out of the way of heat that's gonna then?
Yeah, you gotta figure it out. So what you do is take a survey with which direction the wind's going, first off. Get into the leeward, the windward area, get away from it so that when you break through, it's gonna come up and go away from you. But you do a lot of times you can fold it. Sometimes what we do with the ventilator is create like a louvered with the piece that we cut, and it's rolling on a rafter, and you just lift it up. And if that's the case, you can put it so that you're behind the louvered piece that opens up and blows that way. And then you can get down. And we have poles that are like 15 feet long, like giant piece. So you can get way down, especially like high pitched, like snow roofs or whatever you're dealing with. And you pop a hole, but we are wearing gear. That's why we have all the SCBAs and stuff on there, because it can come in and just blast you. And then you either breathe it or you burn yourself, or, you fall in. It could be a nightmare. Okay, here's another look of like the walls themselves. Here's the outside of the building. In this case, they're blocks. They could be, cinder blocks or brick or something, followed by inside here. This could also not be this. It could be like stucco, like sprayed stucco onto chicken wire and tar paper, or Tyvek and chicken wire. And then you spray the stucco into that spot. Hard to cut through, difficult stuff to deal with. And then as you move in, you have kind of different layers of what the wall is. You have some insulation. It's very, very thin. It's just like a weather barrier, thermal vapor barrier. Some kind of sheathing. Then you have your studs. And then in between your studs, you have this void spaces, which you usually fill up with either insulation or that spray and stuff, which is rigid. I've yet to have to break through that in a fire. It's mostly just the soft, either the rolls or the sprayed in insulation. Probably won't have to deal with that. Here's some different situations where you're dealing with constructible materials between masonry walls. These can be an issue. We're going to get to these in a minute. These kind of awnings on houses. Is that an awning or a mansard? We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so what we want to have are these kind of walls blocking the spread between different rooms. Those are firewalls. They separate the areas out. And basically give you time and distance to manage the fire from one room or one residence to the next. In some cases, like old fire San Francisco building, they're on a common wall between houses in the Sunset, oftentimes, or down through Richmond's district and all the way up into downtown. You see buildings that are built on the same wall structure as the one after that. And there's not much separating that house on fire to the next. Okay, power walls, well, we got that one. Basements, let's touch on what we need to concern ourselves with a basement. It's another void space, isn't it? It's another space where there's, first of all, we don't really have basements on the West Coast. They have these basements in the East Coast that are whole floors, like a man cave, or like they have a TV and an operating room, and it's separate from the garage. And it's a living quarters subterranean. The issue is very limited access. Oftentimes, because of that, you have a big concern with ventilation, people being trapped, and being able to get enough people in there to manage the fire. And not to mention that in some cases, those things are filled with, some caustic materials or whatever you store in that area. People make dark rooms of there. Some people have, little storage areas where they keep some of their paints and things in that location. And when that burns, it's not going to burn clean. Here are some different basements that you may come across. Here's a partial underground basement. You've been in these, right? Where you have just the top windows, like the San Francisco, this Novato Library has this. The walls come up, and if you look at the ceiling, you can see the sky. But if you went outside, you'd see that the wall built up against the grass runs up against the wall, and you have a partial underground. You can have a fully underground location where you walk down into a subterranean floor or a storage area, or a lot of times in like in like a large industrial setting or commercial area. That's the storerooms for the liquor stores. That's the storerooms for the restaurants, and they keep all their extra things in there. You'll see like those hydraulic lifts that drop open, they open up, and you can put stuff on, and they go, yeah, and then you go into that room. Imagine finding a fire in that. You have no ability to get underneath the smoke and heat, and you're going in at the hottest spot, going down into the fire with no ventilation. And then you have these kind of built on a hillside, where the top of the house, a lot of this like Diamond Heights in San Francisco has this. Wild Horse Valley, anywhere you have houses on hills, you'll oftentimes see this kind of building where on this side you would park the car, driving up, park there. On the back end, you have more stairs, more levels built down the slope of the house. And that could be a garage, it could be a second floor, second or third story. What's our issue? Well, just like a chimney, when these doors open, the heat and the wind blow right through here and burn up into the house. And the last big 2 fatality fires in San Francisco were in Diamond Heights for exactly this reason. The wind comes whipping across the hillside from the bay, goes up into those houses, and it runs all the way through them into the top where there's a carport or a garage, and you go into the house and you walk down into the house. And if you let that wind catch and burn through, it just wipes out everything in its path. And so that happened to a couple of times. It also happened, and somebody accidentally pulled, they had a vice grip on the garage door open to keep it open. Somebody walked by and popped it off, closed the garage door, and then as the wind whipped through, the crew was trapped inside. They couldn't get out the garage, which was the very far end of that fire. It killed a couple of people. There's a fire inside there. This guy's super excited. So it whips from the bottom up. Next thing you know, your floor is on fire and everything's moving quickly through your area. Bad news. Control doors as firefighters. Make sure you're not standing in a doorway for a long period of time. Coming through that location. We go into a building and we're going to check, and you think there's a high likelihood of fire behind the door. Your hose, your hose strap, which is basically just a loop of webbing that all firefighters carry, should. And you take it out and you do a little hitch on the doorknob, open the door up, and if anything comes at you, you just pull on that thing and close the door. Stay behind the door. We want to really regulate that access to the room. So that if you've ever fooled around with a fireplace, as I did all the time growing up with my dad, you got the fire burning and smoking, then you close the doors on the fireplace, or you close the damper, and then you open it and it goes boom. Well, that's what a door does when you open it. You add some oxygen to that fire and whoom, and it whips through that room. So you want to make sure that you have control over that whenever you're going to deal with it. A lot of times there's techniques where you open it and you got the fire hose, you open it up, spray that room down, and then close the door. The vapor layer, because the steam is created, it all whooshes around and it gets disrupted. And it would burn you if you didn't close the door. So you're able to spray it in there, cool the room down, close the door, let the vapor barriers reestablish, and then look and see what you've done. And it's to be used for, you know, a quick preemptive attack on the fire. It's not just sit there for 15 minutes and do that. You got to figure out how you can control your fire, where it is, how you're going to go in and deal with it, where, if they're going to cut, where we're going to tell the truck company to cut, and then we're ready to go. Okay, go ahead and cut. And you'll see the roof open, daylight or sunlight, or suddenly you'll just see the smoke go up, and then you run in and you blow that thing out. That's a quick attack on it. Yeah. It's exactly what backdraft is. Yep, exactly. It's like when you're drinking from a gallon of water and you go and you see the little air bubbles go up as you breathe. When you open up the door, it sucks. It's created such a high pressure in there, and then it pulls the pressure out and the oxygen's out there, but it's still hot enough to burn. It's just waiting to gulp a little oxygen. And you open a door, and sometimes you'll see the smoke go like it sucks the air in and goes boom. It'll blow in some cases. I got some cool videos of people, they build little backdraft models, and you can do it and it'll blow like fire donuts, and it's crazy cool. Very cool to play with the right safety guards going on. Okay. There's other things to keep in mind. Stairwells, when we're dealing with high rises, we're going to touch on high rises a little bit more. But how do you get fire and smoke out of here? Well, a lot of times the HVAC systems are all built to, like, doors are meant to shut whenever there's an activation. Sometimes we'll get to that. The doors will close to create some high pressure in here, and then the airflow will be, this is showing it's blowing it down. A lot of times it blows it up and out the roof. And so you clear your access to your stairwells, and then you can go in and use those. And oftentimes in the stairwells, you'll notice they have standpipes along the sides between each, as you go to the door, just to the right or left, you'll have a standpipe. It's a place for you to hook up your dry hose line. You don't want to go up 7 stories with a full hose line. There's no way you'd make it up there. So you take a big long section of it, you flake it on your shoulder, you climb up the stairs, hook it up, flake it down the stairs so that's a nice long, not knotted piece of hose, and then you can go in and fight that fire in that room. Okay, here's some stairs here. These are different types of stairs. Enclosed stairs would be here. Open stairs, naturally ventilated. This might be a little different, but this is, out. These are outside where these are. There's a lot of space around there, but high ceilings. That looks like, it looks like the Civic Center a little bit, doesn't it? I think it's someplace else. Not enclosed, fire rated constructions. It serves as a flow path. They're big, when you're going up and fighting fires in these places, you're gonna see how claustrophobic and clustered everything gets. And you want to make sure that you're up there using your stairs only to get to the fire and away. You're not hanging out on them. Same idea. With like fire escapes nowadays, they'd have to be re-engineered. You can't have the same fixed fire escapes outside for people. They don't build those like that anymore. So those are the old school ways of doing it. There's some different roofs. Okay, here are your arched roofs. These are all going to have some kind of different roofing or truss system built in. Arched roof, it's going to have like a bowstring construction. Here's a mansard. It's kind of got flared sides, and all of this inside is open. Sawtoothed is what you see in a lot of factories post 1880s up until the 1950s. Factories will have this, and the sawtooth, they'll have they'll have windows. They'll have windows on that area so that they face the sun. You get more ambient light inside there. And but that also means if there's a fire up there, that glass can be coming down on you. And a lot of times, if it's older glass and has been retrofitted, it comes down in shards. It doesn't come down in crumbles. Shed roof is some kind of minimal slope on a roof without a pitch. This is called a lantern. Where do you see these? Schoolhouses, some churches, barns. Yep. Here's a gambrel. You got two different sections of the roof. Your regular pitched roof with a beam, rafters, and then some kind of plywood on all of these to not just stabilize it, but then to provide some substrate to nail onto, put your shingles or whatever you're going to put on there. This is the pitched roof, but rather than it ending in two end pieces, there are hips. There are little, angles to the sides of both ends. And then, of course, a flat roof. What do we have here? Yeah, it looks flat. It's pitched because it's got some pitch to it. When Andy Dufresne's mopping the building, they're retarring the roof in Shawshank Redemption. You know what I'm talking about? That's a flat roof. That's a flat roof. They're all up there. So, and then of course a butterfly roof there. Kind of an rare. I don't know if I've ever seen these, but again, you would think this is for a water draw down. What do I need to tell you about roofs? We're not going to hit on most of this, so please go back and study this stuff. Here's a flat roof. Things to look for. There's always going to be a ledge, and then there's some kind of drainage plan for this roof. It looks like it all drains down towards there. Well, you'll have a hole or a drain, or called a scupper, and that's where everything drains out. Scuppers are good for you to look for. Look for those pipes coming off the roof or the scupper holes, because what's a scupper hole tell you? Well, it tells you you're going to have some kind of railing or some kind of edge on the roof. What's the term I'm thinking? You're going to have some kind of wall, right? Some parapet or some kind of wall height. And what you don't want to do is put your ladder up there and then just climb up the ladder and step right off, because the parapet, the sides of the walls are going to be high points, but then there's going to be down below, there's going to be some drop to the actual ceiling of the roof itself. And so by looking at where the scuppers are from down below, you can go, that's got to be the bottom of that's got to be where the flooring is on that roof, right? That's got to be where all the roof is. So I can put that up. It'll be like a scupper, 4 feet higher ridge of the wall. You're going to get up there, climb over the top, sound down below 4 feet, find out that's okay. Then you step down onto that roof. Does that make sense? Roofs are tricky. Be careful. Also, look out for all the stuff that's on roofs. Like these here are going to have big high heating and cooling systems on top. There can be skylights. There can be junk. There's solar arrays. All of the stuff that you're using for solar power is not only made of glass, and you're not going to be able to take it out, but it's also voltage. So you can get yourself in trouble. There are whole separate classes you can take on managing solar arrays or how we deal with fires in the solar panels. Okay. So this is on your, oh, I gave you a study guide. Did you see that? Great. So go through that and kind of fill in stuff with this. This is good. Keep in mind that the arched roofs are like this. There's bowstring construction.
It's just a technical-
Mhm.
Similar.
And get your resident expert for this. So bowstring construction, I'm not gonna keep you any longer. Let's see, what was I gonna show you? There's box beams and I-beams. Pay attention to these little guys. These gusset plates are all that hold a prefabbed truss together. They're just a whole piece of spikes on one side that are punched through, and they lay them across a joint and just hammer it in. And that's all that holds that thing. If any of this fails, that whole piece will catastrophically fail. So gussets and trusses are really nice because the prefab, they go fast unless there's a fire, and then you're in big trouble. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you on Wednesday. Sorry. We only had about, we had a little bit more to go. So look up doors. And I put a couple things on there in terms of doors, windows, and ceiling snow roofs. Okay. Uh-oh, don't do that. Okay. So I'm going to continue going over this for the rest of you. We're going over truss types, roofs, back to gusset plates. And truss assemblies. So here you go. You can see pre-manufactured, whoops. Okay, flat roofs. These are called box beams. Basically beams that are created out of 2x6s or 2x4s that are wrapped, or they're built at 45s together, and they can span distances. They also have a space in between, which you could theoretically, I think, put piping or electric wiring. Here are the I-beams that you can see are made out of composite. They're made out of like glue laminate together, where there's, you know, there's composite material chips that are glued and followed by 2x4s along the upper and bottom edges of this. They provide good support for short distances, shorter than a metal I-beam. But again, when heated, do not stand the test of heat for a prolonged period of time. Here's some images of the on-site building of an actual raftered roof, a ceiling roof, a pitched roof. This is a regular pitch on this. Is not a snow roof or anything with a high angle pitch. I want to say it's a 12-1. I think that's might be what that is. For every 12 inches, you get one, you get, for every foot, you drop 12 inches. I might be incorrect on that though. Here are some pre-manufactured trusses where you can see they've placed in the gusset plates. These guys right here. They don't stand much torque and twist, and certainly not in a flame. So anytime that happens, you can see that there are damages to the fire trusses or the gusset plates. These will fail catastrophically. They're not, they go pretty early when you're dealing with a fire. And it could be a fire that seems pretty under control down in the living quarters, except if it's made it to the roof, it doesn't take much for that roof to now cave in on you, especially if they're uncovered. Here's a parallel cord truss where you have two boards running top and bottom, and then you run right triangles between them and then pull them tight in the middle and the ends. Here's a pitched cord roof, again with the gusset plates holding it in place. As it sags in the middle, the bottom beam holds it in place. Here's a bowstring truss, same idea. You can cause the as there's like a one bow, like a bow rod that runs through here, like an all thread. And on the edges, there are bolts that you tighten and keep the edges here and tightened up, which keeps the top bowed and keeps the structure sound. Here's an arched cord, same kind of variation between the bowstring and the parallel. Manufactured from smaller pieces of wood, and that's so that you can make more of them. And it's a light gauge steel. They are traditional systems made from solid wood or heavy steel, gauge steel. They're becoming more common. Through types 1 and 4 constructions, you're seeing more and more of these engineered things simply go up faster and they're more efficient. And you may be seeing this more on like condos, homes, and apartment complexes and small commercial buildings. Here's some more of that I truss system, gusset plates in place. Here's some lightweight steel trusses. Doesn't take much to heat those up to have them fail. And then on top of them, you're going to have roofing and decks made from plywood, OSB, oriented strand board, which is basically not full sheets of plywood glued together, but chunks and chunks glued together. You could have in the old school the wood tongue and groove that lock and interlock across the ceilings or the roofs. You could have corrugated metal. Many third world areas have corrugated roofing. It's easy, it goes on, it sheds water well. Not great to be walking on, especially when hot. By the way, do not be walking on any mobile home roof at all. It's simply unsafe. There could be sprayable concrete, encapsulated polystyrene, reinforced concrete, or double T performance concrete. Here is an example of different components of a roof deck. You have on the sides here your roof supports or your rafters. In some situations, you may call them rafters. Then across the top, you'll have purlins that are running that connect your roof supports together that discourage twisting and torquing. And then on top of this, you would run your sheathing. And so, depending on the kind of roof we're dealing with, we have to figure out the best way to cut holes in that roof. How are we going to ventilate that situation? Sometimes it's a support roof, sometimes it's just a covering. Here's some cast in place concrete roofing. And then what are you putting on top? Asphalt that can be mopped on. You can have wooden or shake shingles. Traditionally, those were what we would use on most residentials. They have gone away in favor of some kind of asphalt roofing shingles. Rubber, and of course, some kind of solar shingles that are not only protecting from the water and everything, it's actually absorbing heat. These are very high end, and they're going to show up probably more and more and more of our society keeps improving. Rubber, of course, would be watertight. And then traditionally, you had terracotta tile. Slate on the East Coast is a big deal. And some kind of synthetic membrane should be used prior to placing any of this on top, some kind of Tyvek or vapor barrier that keeps the water out and keeps the insulation intact. And then between there, you will have blown in foam or actual insulation itself. You might have them exposed, and you can have, tar and gravel, which is what our comp shingles are made out of. Here's some rubber shingles. Here's some S-tile. Composite, that is like sheets either of asphalt and rock, or it's mopped on tar, and then they pour the gravel on top. Here's a metal roof. Different saw blades needed for different roofs. Okay, so let's look at the different penetrations and openings that you might find there. Traditionally, you needed to have something that was going to allow light in if you're dealing with a large structure. So sunlights, roofs that had large openings. And then you might have additionally on these roofs some kind of HVAC system or plumbing that runs up. You're going to have piping that comes up that allow for ventilation, that allow for septic ventilation as well. Then you have all of the pipes and things that need to run from the HVAC down into the buildings. So you might have, you know, your water and your fuel coming up and down. You also could have solar power, and the solar wires are running down across the rooftop. Any of those things are going to be tripping hazards. And if they're heavy enough, something like a skylight or something like an HVAC system can fall right through the roof. And if you're not careful, you'll fall right in with it. Here's a chimney on the top here. This is a newer kind of like oven vent chimney. Here's a dormer, a little side window that protrudes off of a rooftop. This is what you would call a monitor, in some places a cupola or a cupola. And here's some bathroom vent types. You can have, when we get to high rises, we'll look at scuttle hatches and cock lofts. Those are doors that essentially run from the top floor of a complex up to the roof. It gives you roof access. It would be like a scuttle hatch or a cock loft. Then you have automatic smoke vents that will open when there's fire or they're activated. Ventilation fans and shaft fans that activate and blow out extra smoke and heat in order to give good visualization for firefighters. You have penthouses and bulkhead doors, HVACs, exhausts, and attic walls. So let's get through this. Beware photovoltaic roofs. Any solar panels, remember there's electricity running off of that. Don't be cutting anywhere through these. Certainly don't cut the lines. The panels may not be visible from the ground, so make sure you're up there and you're looking around with your eyes open, you know, and you have a partner with you at all times. These right here can be significant trip and fall hazards, as with any of those pipes and wires that run down below there. Make sure that if they haven't been found and everyone has not been notified, the minute you do find a hazard, emergency traffic, I want to announce there are photovoltaics roof cells on the roof. We're on the Charlie Delta side of the building. There's about, I don't know, 10 by 14 feet long array. There's wires running from these cells down to the Charlie side of the building to a battery. All units be aware on the roof or on the Charlie side that there are solar panels and electricity still on. And that will have to be turned off. Like that's part of also managing a big fire that a truck company will have to manage. That's part of utilities. It's additional to regular electricity, but that has to be managed as well. And that should be caught when you do pre-incident planning. All right. So the things to keep in mind about rain or snow roofs is, of course, with a snow roof, you need added strength. Roofs with snow on them are going to weigh more. So because of that, they have to be reinforced more thoroughly, and or they have to have a higher pitch so that the snow runs off. What's that mean for us? It's going to be very hard to get on this roof and fight a fire. It's going to be very hard to stand there and ventilate. And so what we typically do is take a ceiling ladder or roof ladder, my mistake, that has hooks on it. And you hook the ridge and you lay that ladder across here. You'll put a ground ladder up to that roof ladder, and you transition from the ground ladder onto the roof ladder, go up several rungs, try and secure yourself, and then begin your ventilation in that location. The snow or rain roofs, because of the high pitch, create a big void space in there that's going to cause you to have to reach way down low if you're at the top of that peak, to reach down and actually break into the ceiling of the floor below, the ceiling of the room below. Of course, the trusses, if they're built with trusses, they're going to weaken. And we have potentially everything laying on there is simply going to add more weight to the whole endeavor. Unauthorized security modifications create extreme life safety hazards for firefighters. So make sure if you're looking around, you don't see anything that looks like they've put on maybe gates or some kind of window bars or something across there, because that can be a really bad situation for firefighters. Anything that's been engineered on top there that hasn't been followed or regulated by any agency is subject to bad construction and bad installation. Here's a spot here. You can just see any of these. In fact, that whole area is at danger if there's any weakening below of all those HVAC systems falling through. But look at the tripping hazard. Can you see that? I mean, look, all of this stuff, you're not looking, you're trying to get your gear on, you're trying to get your partner over to a spot, you're looking back and forth, you're looking at the fire activity, the fire behaviors obscuring this. You then step on this thing, kaboom, fall, and you can, do something as simple as sprain an ankle or dislocate a shoulder or an elbow, or you could fall through a weakened spot or fall off that roof. Just be very careful. Water towers, major weight in a small location relatively. High steeples means that stuff can fall down on you, as well as any kind of telecom equipment. So any of this stuff, make sure you've announced the safety. We got to clear some space in case this stuff comes down. Increase the collapse hazards, and obstruction is going to affect ventilation. It may be underneath the rain roofs. It's all sorts of stuff we got to concern ourselves with. All right, let's look at some doors. We look at the material, what's it made out of, and then what's its fire rating. Here's a door. This is a slab door. It looks solid all the way through. Here are your hinges. These are 3 hinges. Sometimes you'll see piano hinges depending on different doors. Usually not doors. You usually see a 3 or 2 hinges on doors. Here's your knob. This is in this situation, an outward swinging door. And you have on here a door, hydraulic door stop or hydraulic, I forget what that's called. Hydraulic door closer that slows the doors closing, or will automatically cause the door to close unless you chalk down below here. This is if you can tell, this looks like a steel encasement, and that's going to be really hard to break into. These are typically in office buildings and commercial structures. Here's some sliding doors, much easier to get in and out, usually residential. Here are folding doors. These are partitions between, like, showrooms or hotels will have conference rooms, and you can fold the doors between the two. If need be, there's 2 different things going on. They're bifold or multifold. Residential occupancies and assembly places will have this. These are in a whole different ballgame themselves. Vertical doors are roll down that are steel doors. These are very hard to manage. In some cases, they will collapse catastrophically if you don't cut them correctly. You have to go through these with metal blades, and oftentimes they mark the entrance to warehouses where there's all sorts of hazardous materials inside, big heat, bad ventilation, chemicals, all bad stuff. So when we practice with door opening and vertical door cutting, this is a big procedure that we'll show videos on. You'll have a lot more time to manage this in your fire academy, or after that, once you get on the line, or if you have any of these warehouse districts, hopefully you get a chance to go and cut some doors if one of them is condemned. And so they see them on loading docks, garage doors, freight elevators, fire doors, like actual fire department doors, protecting openings as well. Here are some revolving doors, which are meant to minimize airflow and reduce heat and cooling loss, so that if you're heating or cooling the inside of a hotel, that doesn't let the heat out, or if you're cooling it, doesn't let the cool out. It also will impede people being able to flee quickly. So you see that they put in these doors on either side that are usually hooked up as emergency doors, whereby you press on this, the panic bar, and break that seal, the alarms will start to sound. So when you have a lot of people that need to leave quickly, these doors can be opened in an emergency and it will signal the alarm. That also allows, everyone to take a look, as well as notifying PD or fire and getting a response time. Here's a couple of different styles of doors. We have a paneled door, where these are solid pieces of wood followed by little panels that are TNG'd or kind of shipped. They're usually tongue and grooved in between these different pieces. Here's a solid core where there's no void space between it. It's got full pieces of wood or some material between. And then here's a hollow core door where there's a door frame created, but there are spaces empty in between. You can imagine this is going to have a higher fire rating than the solid core will than a hollow core door. And you have flush doors. Here's a wood panel or a slab door. Here we go. So let's see. Solid core doors, interior laminated wood, particle board, or mineral composition. Usually plywood made out of sheet metal may be attached to the exterior, makes forcing it more difficult for sure. Better fire barriers than panel or hollow core doors. And if closed, it'll act as a barrier between the fires. So you want solid core doors when activated. Sometimes in office buildings, you'll see that they have a little magnetic circle on them that locks to the sides of the hallway. And when a fire alarm goes off, those magnets fail, or the electromagnet shuts down, and the doors are closed by the automatic door closers. And that is serving as a fire break. Hollow core doors, they're usually between interior rooms of a house. The exteriors are usually panel and solid core to get from the inside to the outside. So garage or front doors or back doors are usually solid core or panel, whereas between bedroom and hallway, usually hollow core. Much less integrity when it comes to a fire. Here's some glass doors made out of a metal frame. Here's a steel door, cheap, lightweight. There's empty inside there. It's not going to be filled with full steel. It's usually panel and flush, and they're about 1 3/4 inches thick, so they match the width of a 2x4. And they can be made heavy if need be. Here's some good sized fire doors that are closing whenever the alarm goes off. On the opposite side of this, you'd have like a little panel of a magnet. And there's on the wall back here and on the wall over here, another magnet, an electromagnet wired in, so that when the fire alarm goes or the sprinklers activate or some relation of those two, those doors automatically close. Here's how you would tell with fire doors, their fire rating. There's a fire rating of 8. Fire blocks spread and protect the openings of fire walls. All types of occupancies may have this. And this kind of tells you what their rating is. Fire rating, I think that says 8. Let's keep going. So remember, when we're dealing with these, again, just like everything else with door construction, it depends on the type of occupancy, the amount of space around the door opening, the required fire protection rating. They're not going to over-engineer unless need be. So in houses, you're probably not going to run into metal doors in a house unless it's like an interior-exterior door where you're not only worried about fire spread, but you're worried about burglary. Here's another roll-down door. Here's a sliding barn door, sometimes people call it. But this is more of an industrial steel barn door that can lock at the end of the business day. Here's that electromagnet that will shut off and thereby close that door whenever the alarm sounds. It must be closed during a fire. In fact, as firefighters, when we go around and we charge the system or when we enact the alerts, that's one of the things we check. Did it shut the doors that are around here? So the doors are either by a fusible link or a smoke detector, and their son decides when any design is designed to close when any component of the alarm system is activated. Okay, let's look at a couple windows here. So here's your window. You have the pane, you have the sash itself, you have the jamb that fits in here. Here's some headers, some sister blocks in here, some sister studs, and then some cripples down below just to make it the right size. You can do it through the categorization, could be by glazing or thicknesses. Here's a triple glazed door, window rather. Oftentimes, when you have different glazings, different levels, they'll fill the in between layers with an inert gas that both insulates and won't ignite. On buildings like this, most of these windows are almost impossible to break. Usually down one side of the building will be tempered glass windows. And as a truck company, your job is to know where in this building are the windows that we can break and access inside this building. The rest of them are going to be laminate or some kind of unbreakable, almost bulletproof type glass. Some of these will open for the most part, as you know. Most windows on high rises do not open, therefore, only light. They're not for ventilation. Here's a single hung. It goes vertically, double hung. They go up and down. They can both go up or both go down. Kind of a more traditional style window in the Sunset District of California, San Francisco area, older districts. These doors can, on a hot day, you're going to want to open the top one. It lets the heat out. Just kind of depends on how you like doing it. That's typically how I've seen it done. Here's a casement where both doors swing out and a sliding horizontal versus a sliding vertical. You have an awning type or projecting kind of window, vertical pivot that will swing out the way that you would do on a roof. If you were ventilating, we're essentially cutting a square and running it on a rafter. And the same idea here, you have one pivot point in the middle, and you can pivot this window left or right. That's a vertical. Here's a horizontal. And these all might have a specific way of managing things when fires occur. Be aware of security windows when you have bars or gates on these. These are usually in old Gothic areas of town or old Gothic buildings or industrial buildings where there's a lot of crime or in bad parts of the town. And the danger is if we need to use these windows, we won't be able to. So one of the first things a truck company or a rescue company will do is called softening the doors. You soften the doors by going around and opening and cutting every one of those bars so that the windows are able to be accessed should you need to do that. So we go around and soften all the doors to make sure the doors can open, the windows don't have any. We can get in and out should we need to. And that's a big deal. Dealing with the industrial warehouse fire. That stuff can happen. Going on, it's an old building, it's not up to code. Things pretty often go wrong catastrophically. At least it's not as you had planned it to go. Something doesn't work. Electricity where you thought the panel was in another location. The standpipes go to another spot than where you had retrofitted parts of the building that aren't on sprinklers, even though you had been told they were. So whenever those things happen, and if need be, you need to get out, we want to make sure that we have the access and the availability to do so. So we'll go around with saws as a like a RIC company, rescue intervention, a rapid intervention crew. If you're not doing anything, you get all your gear out and you stand at the front door and you go, okay, something goes wrong, we're going in. Well, one of the things you can do is go around, look for any of those things that are gonna be hazards to getting in and out. Along with looking for safety violations, safety things that might be concerning. Wires, pools, broken glass, something in the eyesight that get in your face, whatever. Go through and clean that area up and make it ready in case you need to move quickly. You're already ahead of the game. That's the step. There we go. Hang on. There you go. Okay. So steel shutters, again, real big hazard. Oh, that's it. Okay. That's a brief intro on all of this stuff. Gang, I understand I rapidly went through some of this and some of it was kind of briefly touched on, very superficial. I would say go find the chapter, make sure you go through the study guide I gave you and make sure that if you have any questions, bring them to class the next day. It's been a few years since I've actually done construction. I did it from the time I was 13 to 25 when I got picked up and fired. When I started going fire, actually 23, whatever. Been a while since I've been around stuff commercially or working in the trades. So some of it has changed and some of it I forgot. If that's the case, bring your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. If not, we got a couple extra pros in class to make sure that we put them to the opportunity to tell us what I don't know. And remember, the key is we want to know what everything is built up so that we have to take it down. We do it quickly with the least amount of ancillary damage, and we can effectively manage these situations without making them worse, without cutting something that could cause the entire roof to collapse on somebody below, or in the very least, doing a bunch of work that ends up being not useful. Cutting a hole where there's already below it, there's concrete. You can't clear that spot. We'll touch a lot more on this as we go through fire tactics and ventilation. So until then, I'll see you. Thanks for sticking around.